The pristine halls of the Galactic Combat Academy echoed with whispers as Thex strutted through its crystalline corridors. His iridescent scales gleamed under the artificial light, a testament to his noble drachnid heritage. At just 20 solar cycles old, he was already considered a prodigy among his kind, having mastered their ancient combat arts with unprecedented speed. But it wasn't enough. Not when humans, those primitive bipeds from a backwater planet, were beginning to dominate the intergalactic fighting circuits. Their victories defied logic. How could beings with such fragile bodies and limited lifespans compete with species that had evolved for combat? Thex had spent months tracking down James Hunter, a retired human champion who now taught at the academy. The human wasn't particularly impressive to look at. Graying hair, weather-worn face, and a slight limp from an old injury. Yet something about his quiet confidence made Thex's scales bristle. "Professor Hunter," Thex called out, his voice carrying the musical undertones of his species. "I challenge you to combat." The human didn't even look up from his datapad. "No." Thex felt his neck frills flare with indignation. "You dare refuse a formal challenge from a drachnid warrior?" "Kid, I'm trying to grade papers." Hunter's eyes remained fixed on his work. "I retired from fighting years ago." "Because you're afraid. Because humans are finally realizing their place in the galaxy." Thex pressed, drawing closer. Several students stopped to watch the confrontation. Hunter finally looked up, his dark eyes carrying a weight Thex hadn't noticed before. "You really want to know why I retired?" "Because I got tired of sending promising young fighters to the medical bay. Or worse." "I am no ordinary fighter," Thex declared. "I am the youngest master of the 7 forms. My combat rating is impressive on paper," Hunter interrupted. "But you haven't learned the most important lesson yet." "And what's that, human?" Hunter set down his datapad. "That real combat isn't about forms or ratings. It's about survival. Something my species had to master long before we reached the stars." "Then prove it," Thex insisted. "One match. If you win, I'll never bother you again. If I win, it proves what everyone already knows, that humanity's recent successes are just luck." The corridor had grown crowded now, students and faculty gathering to witness the exchange. Hunter stood slowly, his movement deliberate. "Training room 7. 10 minutes. No powered assists, no neural enhancements. Just you, me, and whatever nature gave us." Thex felt a thrill of victory. "Agreed." The training room's force field hummed to life as they took their positions. Thex moved with fluid grace, his enhanced musculature allowing him to shift between defensive stances with perfect precision. Hunter simply stood there, hands loose at his sides, watching. "Begin," announced the room's eye. Thex launched forward with blinding speed, his right arm extending for a precisely calculated strike. Hunter wasn't there. A grip like steel caught Thex's extended arm, and suddenly the world spun. He hit the ground with bone-jarring force. "First mistake," Hunter said calmly. "You telegraphed your attack." Thex sprang up, his secondary heart pumping combat hormones through his system. He struck again, faster this time, incorporating the unpredictable patterns of fourth form. Hunter moved like water, each attack sliding past him, as if Thex were moving in slow motion. "Second mistake. You're fighting the battle in your head instead of reading your opponent." Frustration broke Thex's perfect form. He lashed out with a forbidden technique, his retractable claws extending mid-strike. Hunter's expression changed then, from patience to something else, something that made Thex's primitive hindbrain scream danger. The next few seconds were a blur of motion and pain. Thex found himself on his back, every nerve ending firing warnings, while Hunter held him immobile with seemingly minimal effort. "Final mistake," Hunter said quietly. "You assumed that because we look soft, we are soft. Humanity didn't become the apex predator of Earth by being the strongest or fastest. We did it by learning to turn everything, even our weaknesses, into advantages." The room's AI announced Hunter's victory, but Thex barely heard it through the ringing in his ears. As his vision began to fade, he saw Hunter kneeling beside him, calling for medical assistance. "Don't worry, kid," the human's voice seemed to come from far away. "Once you're out of the hospital, we can start your real education." Then darkness claimed him, along with the first seeds of understanding about why humans were truly dangerous. The medical bay's soft blue lights pulsed in rhythm with Thex's heartbeats, all three of them. He lay on the recovery bed, his pride hurting far more than his healing injuries. The door slid open, and Hunter walked in, carrying something under his arm. "Your genetic reconstruction is complete," Hunter said, pulling up a chair. "The doctors say you can leave tomorrow." Thex turned his head away. "Come to gloat, human?" "No, come to offer you a choice." Hunter placed a worn leather-bound book on Thex's bedside table. "This is something we call a journal. Actual paper. From Earth. Primitive recording technology." Thex scoffed, but curiosity made him glance at it. "It's my combat log. Every fight I've lost, and there have been many, is documented here. Every lesson learned, every scar earned." Hunter tapped the journal. "Before we developed fancy neural interfaces and combat simulations, this is how we learned." "Why show me this?" "Because you remind me of myself at your age. Talented, arrogant, convinced that perfect form equals perfect fighting." Hunter's eyes grew distant. "It took losing my team on Proxima B to learn otherwise." This caught Thex's attention. The Battle of Proxima B was legendary, a small human special forces unit holding off an entire swarm invasion force for 3 days. "You were there." "Command ordered us to retreat. The swarm was overwhelming our positions, but there were civilian researchers still in the facility." Hunter rolled up his sleeve, revealing a web of scars. "We stayed. Lost half our team in the first hour. The rest of us, we had to forget everything we knew about proper combat. We improvised, used mining equipment as weapons, turned ventilation shafts into traps, did things that would make your combat instructors faint. But you survived," Thex said quietly. "Some of us did, not because we were stronger or faster than the swarm. We survived because humans have something your people haven't needed to develop yet: the absolute refusal to accept defeat." Hunter stood. "So here's your choice. You can go back to your perfect forms and technical excellence, or you can learn how humans really fight." Thex stared at the journal. His combat instructors had always taught that improvisation was the mark of poor preparation. That true mastery meant perfect execution of established techniques. Yet this human had decimated his flawless form with seemingly casual ease. "The training will be brutal," Hunter continued. "I won't teach you new techniques. I'll break down everything you think you know about combat. You'll hate me most days. But if you survive the training, you'll understand why humanity's warriors are feared across the galaxy." Thex's claws extended unconsciously, piercing the medical bed's covering. The proper response would be to refuse, to maintain his species' dignity. But he couldn't forget the feeling of helplessness when Hunter had moved. That casual display of power that made all his training seem like a child's game. "When do we start?" Thex asked. Hunter smiled. It wasn't entirely friendly. "We already have." Lesson 1. True combat begins in a hospital bed, when you decide whether to quit or learn from defeat. He headed for the door. "Rest up. Tomorrow, you learn what real pain feels like." As the door closed behind Hunter, Thex reached for the journal with trembling claws. The leather felt alien against his scales. He opened it carefully, mindful of his sharp claws, and began to read the first entry. Combat log. Earth date 2157. "Today I learned that perfect form means nothing when you're bleeding out in a ditch. The only technique that matters is the one that keeps you alive." Thex read through the night, his understanding of combat and humans shifting with each page turn. By morning, his world would never be the same. Training began before dawn in the Academy's oldest combat chamber. No force fields, No safety protocols. Just bare metal walls scared by decades of fights. Hunter stood barefoot on the worn floor, wearing simple workout clothes instead of his professor's uniform. "Attack me," he told Thex. "Don't think. Don't plan. Just attack." Thex hesitated. "Without proper form. Your enemy won't wait for proper form. Attack." Thex lunged, trying to forget years of training. Hunter sidestepped and swept Thex's legs, sending him crashing down. Again. This continued for hours. Each time Thex attacked, Hunter found new ways to put him on the ground. By midday, Thex's scales were dulled with sweat, and his muscles trembled with exhaustion. "You're still thinking like a drachnid," Hunter said, offering him water. "Look at this." He pointed to a deep gouge in the wall. "Know what made that? A Krivek warrior. 12 feet tall, armor plating that could stop plasma rounds. He thought size and strength meant victory. What happened to him? I used his strength against him. The bigger they are." Hunter smiled. "Humanity survived on Earth because we learned to hunt creatures 10 times our size. We didn't have claws or armor. We had this." He tapped his temple. "And this." He placed a hand over his heart. "I don't understand," Thex admitted. "You will. Now forget everything you know about combat stances. Watch how I move." Days turned into weeks. Hunter's training defied every combat principle Thex had learned. They fought in darkness, in cramped spaces, weighted down with equipment. Hunter taught him to use the environment, to turn disadvantages into weapons. "Your scales are tough," Hunter noted one day, helping Thex up after another bout. "But they limit your flexibility. Show me how that weakness becomes strength." Gradually, Thex began to understand. He learned to use his rigid scales as armor, to angle them to deflect strikes. His tail, once used only for balance, became a devastating weapon. But the real lessons came from Hunter's stories. Tales of human warriors throughout history, fighting against impossible odds. Of soldiers carrying wounded comrades through battlefields. Of mothers lifting vehicles to save their children. "Humans are weak," Hunter explained during one rest break. "We break easily, but we've turned that weakness into our greatest strength. We know we're fragile, so we fight harder. We know we can die, so we live more fiercely. We know we can lose, so we never stop fighting." One morning, Hunter brought in a group of combat droids. "Final test," he said. "These are set to kill mode. No safety protocols." "That's forbidden," Thex protested. "The Academy regulations. Your enemy won't follow regulations. Show me what you've learned." The droids attacked. Thex found himself moving without thought, using everything around him. He turned one droid's strength against another, used fallen debris as weapons, kept moving, adapting, surviving. When it was over, destroyed droids littered the floor. Thex stood breathing heavily, his scales dented but unbroken. Hunter nodded slowly. "Now you're starting to fight like a human." "I understand now," Thex said. "Why your species survived despite your weaknesses. Why you're feared in combat." "Oh." Hunter raised an eyebrow. "Tell me." "Humans don't fight to prove superiority or maintain form. You fight to survive. And you'll do anything to survive." "Close." Hunter picked up a piece of droid debris. "We fight to protect each other, our homes, our beliefs. That's what makes us dangerous. We're not fighting for victory. We're fighting for something more important." Thex looked at his mentor with new eyes. "What's next?" "Now." Hunter grinned. "Now we see if you can use what you've learned. The Galactic Combat Tournament starts next week. Time to show the galaxy what happens when Drachnid precision meets human adaptability." The Galactic Combat Tournament arena sprawled across an entire asteroid, its crystalline dome containing thousands of spectators from across known space. Thex stood in the preparation chamber, examining his reflection in the polished wall. His once pristine scales now bore marks of training, each dent and scratch a lesson learned. Your first opponent is a Krell warrior, Hunter said, checking Thex's equipment. Remember, no style, no form, just survival. Thex finished. But this is different. The whole galaxy will be watching. Good. Let them watch. Let them see what happens when you stop trying to be perfect and start being effective. The tournament's first rounds passed in a blur. Thex faced opponents who would have destroyed him months ago. A Krell berserker, twice his size, fell to his newfound adaptability. A Quanter psychic warrior, unable to predict his now instinctive movements, was overwhelmed by his unconventional tactics. But in the semifinals, Thex faced his past. Karaz, his former combat instructor, stood across the arena. The elder Drachnid scales gleamed with ritual polish, his stance a picture of classical perfection. Disgraceful, Karaz called out, seeing Thex's battle-worn appearance. You dishonor our traditions, fighting like a human savage. The old Thex would have felt shame. Now he felt only focus. As the match began, Karaz moved with textbook precision, each strike a masterpiece of form. Thex didn't try to match him. He fought like Hunter had taught him, using the environment, turning Karaz's perfect technique against him. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Thex systematically dismantled the Drachnid master's defense. When Karaz lay defeated, he looked up at his former student with a mixture of shock and revelation. "What have you become?" Karaz whispered. "Something new," Thex replied, helping him up. "Something better." The final match brought an unexpected opponent, a human woman named Rivera, scared and compact, moving with the same predatory grace as Hunter. As they circled each other, Thex saw her recognize Hunter's influence in his style. "So you're James's new project," she said, launching a devastating combination. "He told me about you." The fight that followed became instant legend. Rivera was everything Hunter had described. Adaptable, relentless, fighting with a creativity that defied prediction. But now Thex could match her. His Drachnid strength and natural weapons combined with human unpredictability created something the arena had never seen. They fought for nearly an hour, neither able to gain decisive advantage. The crowd roared as they exchanged techniques from a dozen worlds, improvising new combinations on the spot. Finally, Thex saw his opening. A tiny hesitation as Rivera favored an old injury. The victory strike was clean, precise, and utterly unorthodox. As medical teams rushed in, Rivera grinned through bloodied lips. "Welcome to the family, kid." Later, in the victor's chamber, Hunter presented Thex with his medal. "How does it feel?" "Strange," Thex admitted. "I won, but I don't feel superior anymore. I feel human," Hunter suggested. "Connected," Thex corrected, "to something bigger than forms and traditions. To the real spirit of combat." Hunter nodded. "That's the final lesson. True strength isn't about being the best. It's about being part of something greater than yourself. Now, are you ready for the real challenge?" "There's more." "Of course. Now you help me teach the next generation." After all, Hunter smiled, someone needs to show them why humans aren't the only ones who can change the galaxy. The graduation ceremony at the Galactic Combat Academy looked different this year. Alongside the traditional Drachnid warriors stood humans, Krell, and a dozen other species. At the center of it all stood Thex, now an instructor, his battle-worn scales, a sharp contrast to the ceremonial robes. "Combat isn't about dominance," Thex addressed the graduates. "It's about protection, about standing together against whatever threatens those we care about." He caught Hunter's approving nod from the audience. "5 years ago, I thought I could defeat a human to prove our superiority. Instead, I learned that true strength comes from our differences." The ceremony was interrupted by emergency alerts. A swarm fleet, larger than any previously encountered, had breached the system's defenses. As evacuation orders blared, Thex and Hunter shared a look. "Like Proxima B?" Thex asked. "Worse," Hunter replied. "But this time, we're ready." They organized the graduates into mixed species teams, each combining different strengths. Arachnid durability paired with human adaptability. Krell power enhanced by quantar precision. The defenders became something new, a fusion of all they had learned from each other. The battle that followed would be studied for generations. The swarm, expecting isolated resistance, found unified opposition. Where traditional tactics failed, hybrid techniques succeeded. Thex and Hunter fought side by side, their movements synchronized through years of training together. Hours into the battle, Hunter took a serious hit protecting a group of civilian evacuees. As medical teams rushed to stabilize him, he gripped Thex's arm. "Remember what I taught you," Hunter gasped, "about why humans never quit." "Because you're protecting something worth dying for," Thex answered. "But today, you're not dying. We protect our own." The battle ended not with a single heroic act, but with countless small victories. Teams of former rivals working in perfect harmony. Traditional enemies combining their strengths. When the swarm finally retreated, they left behind more than destruction. They left proof that the galaxy was changing. In the aftermath, Thex visited Hunter in the medical bay, roles reversed from their first meeting. The human was battered but alive, his legendary resilience proven once again. "The Academy Board wants to make our combined training program official," Thex said. "They're calling it the Hunter-Thex Combat Protocol." Hunter laughed, then winced. "Terrible name. But the concept is sound. Every species has something to teach, something to learn." "I've been thinking about what you said years ago," Thex mused, "about humans turning weaknesses into strengths. Maybe that's your species' greatest gift to the galaxy, teaching us that our differences make us stronger together." "Getting philosophical in your old age," Hunter teased. "Learning from the best." Thex placed Hunter's old journal on the bedside table. "I've added my own entries. Think it's time to pass it on to the next student who needs to learn these lessons." Hunter smiled. "You know what? I think you finally figured out why humans are really dangerous. It's not our combat skills or our survival instinct." "No," Thex agreed. "It's your ability to turn enemies into allies, to make everyone around you stronger." He looked out the window at the mixed groups of students training together in the courtyard. To change the galaxy, one fight at a time. Not bad for a Drachnid who thought he could beat up a human to prove a point. Not bad for a human who was too stubborn to stay retired, Thex countered. They watched the sun set over the academy, where new generations would learn that the greatest victories come not from defeating others, but from learning to fight alongside them.